Everyone is completely wrong about how high XRP can really go. You've been told for years that XRP can't hit $100, that it's impossible, that it would require $1 trillion market cap. But what if I told you that all of that is based on the wrong math, and that XRP might just be sitting on one of the biggest hidden multipliers in crypto history? Welcome back to Journey to XRP, the channel where we cut through the noise and bring you the real numbers behind the revolution that's about to shock the financial world. In today's video, I'm going to walk you through something that's going to change how you look at XRP forever, because for the first time, we have hard data, real analysis, showing exactly how much capital needs to flow into XRP to make massive moves in price. And spoiler alert, it's not even close to what you think. We're talking about tiny inflows triggering monumental increases. And when you see this, you'll understand why XRP might not just be undervalued. It might be one of the most asymmetric opportunities in history. Now, before we dive deep, if you're part of the Journey to XRP community, make sure you smash that like button, not just because it helps the algorithm, but because we're building a movement here. Every like and subscribe pushes the XRP story further out into the world, and trust me, that matters right now more than ever. All right, let's get into the real reason everyone's been underestimating XRP. For years, people have looked at price potential purely through the lens of market cap. Oh, XRP can't hit $100 because it would mean $1 trillion cap. But that logic assumes that $1 flowing into XRP equals $1 in market cap increase. And that's not how this market works, not even close. See, the crypto market is far more elastic. Prices don't just move with inflows, they accelerate with demand. And when we look at XRP's unique liquidity structure, that acceleration becomes extreme. Recently, some fascinating data emerged that proves just how powerful that dynamic really is. It turns out XRP's price isn't being held back by lack of belief. It's being held back by misunderstanding. And when we remove that misunderstanding, when we start to see the mechanics for what they truly are, suddenly those impossible price targets start looking a lot more realistic. So in this video, we're breaking the illusion. We're going to look at actual inflow data, the multiplier effect, and what it really means for XRP to go from where it is today to where it should be based on simple supply and demand mechanics. By the end of this, you're not just going to understand XRP's potential, you're going to feel it. Let's start by looking at the numbers that flip the script on everything we thought we knew about XRP's price potential. Let's jump straight in. So recently, two well-known analysts in the XRP community, Chad Steingraber and Zach Rector, ran an experiment that completely changes how we think about XRP's price movement. Chad was analyzing how much money needs to flow into XRP to actually make it move on the charts, and what he discovered was shocking. In one 30-minute window, a net inflow of just $4.78 million moved XRP's price by 5 cents, from $2.15 to $2.20. That's barely a few $1 million in inflows, creating tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars in market cap growth. It's the kind of result that makes you stop and question everything you've heard about market caps and realistic price ceilings. Zach Rector then took that data and ran the math. He wanted to figure out the multiplier effect, how much XRP's market cap increases for every dollar that enters the system. And after crunching the numbers, he came up with something incredible, a 598x market cap multiplier. Think about what that means for a second. For every $10 that flows into XRP, the total market cap increases by roughly $5,980. That's not speculation. That's based on observable, real-world data from live trading. It reveals just how sensitive XRP's price is to capital flow and how little it actually takes to send the market cap soaring. Now, obviously, this number isn't set in stone. The multiplier will fluctuate over time depending on liquidity, supply, and overall sentiment in the market. But even with a conservative view, this shows just how dramatically XRP responds to buying pressure. It's like lighting a match in a dry forest. Even a small spark can ignite an enormous move. Most people assume that for XRP to reach high prices, there must be massive inflows of capital and billions upon billions of dollars. But this data proves that XRP's structure is uniquely optimized for acceleration. The way liquidity is managed, the way its ledger functions, and how the market reacts, all combine to amplify even small amounts of demand. And this is why so many people who rely on traditional financial logic completely misunderstand XRP. They assume it follows the same rules as equities or commodities. But XRP's design, as a bridge currency with deep liquidity mechanisms, operates on a far more efficient model. This is the kind of revelation that forces you to rethink what price potential even means. Because if it takes less than $5 million to move XRP by a few cents, imagine what happens when hundreds of millions start flowing in, not from retail traders, but from institutions, funds, and eventually ETFs. And that's exactly where this story gets interesting, because those inflows are no longer a theory. The gates are starting to open. Next, let's break down exactly how that 598x multiplier scales and what happens when real institutional money starts flooding in. The numbers might sound unbelievable, but they're about to make complete sense. Now that we understand the multiplier effect, let's talk about what it really means in motion, because this is where things get mind-bending. When Zach Rector broke down that 598x multiplier, he essentially revealed how sensitive XRP's market structure is. It means that a few $1 million in buying pressure doesn't just nudge the price, it detonates it upward. Imagine this: if you put only $100 million into XRP, the total market cap could expand by nearly $60 billion under that same ratio. And to be clear, 100 million sounds like a huge amount to most of us. But for major funds, family offices, or sovereign entities, that's pocket change. A single mid-tier hedge fund could deploy that kind of capital without blinking. Now multiply that by dozens of institutions preparing to diversify into crypto, and suddenly you see how the numbers start stacking fast. This is why the idea that XRP can't reach $1 trillion market cap never really held up. People assume we'd need $1 trillion in fresh money, but in reality, we'd need only a fraction of that flowing through the right channels. Because of XRP's efficiency and its tight supply, small inflows get magnified across the entire ecosystem. The 598x ratio isn't magic. It's just the natural outcome of supply, liquidity depth, and the way order books operate. XRP's trading volume is spread across multiple exchanges, but the available liquidity at each level of the order book is relatively thin. When new money comes in, it doesn't find a wall of sellers, it finds gaps. And prices jump rapidly as buyers chase limited supply higher. Now take that same structure and imagine what happens when institutions begin pouring in not millions, but billions. Even if that multiplier moderates over time, say it drops to 300x or even 200x, the impact remains enormous. It's enough to propel XRP into multi-trillion-dollar territory without needing absurd amounts of cash. This is the moment where the conversation flips. Instead of asking, can XRP hit $100, the real question becomes, what would stop it? Because mathematically, the runway is wide open. And remember, this isn't taking place in a vacuum. We're heading into a period where ETFs, institutional adoption, and regulatory clarity are converging all at once. The infrastructure to absorb that capital and route it into compliant assets is being built right now. So if a few $1 million can already make XRP jump 5 cents, what do you think happens when entire funds, pension portfolios, and sovereign institutions begin allocating? That's where the next phase of this story begins. The phase that could finally transform XRP from a misunderstood altcoin into a cornerstone of global liquidity. Let's explore that next, the institutional wave, the ETF catalyst, and how Ripple's escrow system sets the stage for an explosive price breakout. Institutional money, that's the game changer everyone's been waiting for. And right now, all the signs point toward that door swinging wide open for XRP. According to Polymarket, there's now over a 70% chance that an XRP ETF will go live in 2025. Think about what that means. For the first time, traditional financial institutions, pension funds, hedge funds, asset managers could get easy, compliant exposure to XRP without ever touching an exchange. That's billions in potential inflows waiting for one simple green light. And when that happens, those hundreds of millions we just talked about turn into waves of institutional capital. Because an ETF doesn't just create access, it creates legitimacy. It signals to the world that XRP has officially crossed the line from speculative crypto to regulated financial instrument. And once that happens, it's game over for the old narrative that XRP can't hit 3-digit prices. But here's the twist. Despite all that potential buying pressure, the current market isn't fully reflecting it yet. And the reason lies in something that's been quietly happening behind the scenes: Ripple's escrow system. Every month, Ripple unlocks a portion of XRP from escrow, and over time, that pool has been shrinking fast. As Ripple continues to distribute these tokens, they often sell over-the-counter, OTC, directly to large buyers. This means that even when massive transactions happen, Say an institution buys $500 million worth of XRP, the open market doesn't see that impact. No giant green candles, no explosive move. The deal happens quietly, off exchange. Why? Because Ripple and the institutions know what would happen if those buys hit the market. The price would skyrocket instantly. They prefer to manage accumulation discreetly to avoid destabilizing prices while large positions are being built. But here's the catch, that luxury won't last forever. Ripple's escrow is finite. It's running down month by month, and once that supply dries up, institutions will have no choice but to buy directly from the open market. That's when the multiplier effect goes nuclear, because when you combine trillions in institutional demand with a shrinking pool of supply and no OTC buffer, the market has to reprice XRP rapidly to meet that new reality. And remember who's behind this. The people at Ripple aren't amateurs. We're talking about individuals like Craig Phillips, who spent 35 years at Morgan Stanley and BlackRock. These are the architects of modern finance, not crypto influencers. They understand liquidity, they understand price discovery, and they're positioning Ripple and XRP for a world where those two things collide. When that moment hits, when ETFs go live, OTC dries up, and the open market becomes the only source, XRP's valuation won't just rise, it will re-rate. It'll find a new equilibrium that reflects its true global role in liquidity and payments. The best part? That re-rating hasn't even started yet. We're still early. So early that most people don't even realize how close we are to the trigger point. Up next, we'll break down exactly what happens when that trigger is pulled, when Ripple's escrow supply runs out and institutions finally have to buy from the same market as everyone else. That's the moment the real fireworks begin. This is where everything starts coming together, the countdown to the escrow supply shock that could send XRP into a full-blown price eruption. For years, Ripple has been quietly managing its supply through an escrow system, releasing and selling XRP in a controlled, strategic way. This approach has kept the market stable, but it has also masked what XRP's true value could look like under natural, unrestricted demand. Institutions have been buying directly from Ripple through OTC deals, avoiding the open market entirely. But that's about to change. Ripple's escrow balance is depleting fast. Month after month, those releases get smaller, and when the final reserves are gone, when Ripple has no more large tranches left to sell, the only place left to source XRP will be the open market. Now picture this, massive institutions, the same ones managing billions in assets, need exposure to XRP. They can no longer call Ripple and buy discreetly. Instead, they have to step into public exchanges, competing with everyone else, retail traders, funds, and whales, for the same limited pool of tokens. That's when the 598x multiplier becomes more than theory. It becomes reality. Because the moment billions start hitting exchanges, the thin order books get vaporized, prices jump gaps, supply vanishes in seconds, and XRP's price is forced to skyrocket to meet the new demand. We're not talking about gradual growth here. This is explosive, nonlinear movement, the kind of parabolic shift that redefines what price discovery even means. It's the same pattern we saw in 2017 when XRP went from a few cents to over $3 in less than a year. The difference this time, now the fundamentals, the infrastructure, and the institutional demand are 10 times stronger, and the timing couldn't be more perfect. We have ETFs on the horizon, global adoption expanding, and Ripple's own network on-demand liquidity being integrated into more financial systems around the world. This isn't retail hype anymore. This is strategic institutional positioning. When these forces collide, institutional capital, open market scarcity, and systemic utility, the market will have no choice but to reprice XRP to levels most people still can't even visualize. And that's the beauty of being early. Because while the rest of the world is still debating whether XRP can hit $10 or $100, those who understand the mechanics, the supply curve, the multiplier, the liquidity squeeze, already know the answer. It's not about if XRP will revalue, it's about when. And that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, the pattern unfolding on XRP's chart right now that mirrors the setup before the 2017 explosion. What's happening technically might just confirm what we already know fundamentally, that XRP's next move could be one for the history books. If you've been watching XRP's chart closely, you can feel it. That same quiet buildup we saw right before the 2017 breakout. The setup is almost identical. Back then, XRP moved sideways for months, consolidating, trapping impatient traders, and convincing everyone that nothing was going to happen. And then, almost overnight, it exploded, melting faces, rewriting portfolios, and shocking every single analyst who said it couldn't be done. Now zoom out and look at what's forming again, that bullish symmetrical triangle. It's a pattern of pure pressure, supply getting squeezed, demand coiling tighter until finally one decisive move changes everything. This time, though, the difference is monumental. In 2017, XRP had hype. In 2025, it has infrastructure, utility, and institutional recognition. Ripple is integrated with banks, liquidity corridors are live, and the world's biggest money managers are circling like hawks, waiting for that green light to get in. And when the break comes, it won't just be a pump, when it will be a revaluation event. A complete rewriting of what the market thinks XRP is worth. Because you can't price a global liquidity bridge the same way you price a meme coin. The math doesn't fit anymore. We are watching the dawn of something bigger than a simple bull run. This is the transformation of the global financial system, and XRP is right at the center of it. So here's the truth. While most people are still caught in doubt, second-guessing every dip and every headline, the ones who understand this moment are simply accumulating, learning, and preparing, because they know that once the market wakes up, there won't be time to react, only to watch. The charts are aligning, the fundamentals are in motion, and the narrative is flipping right in front of our eyes. XRP isn't waiting for permission anymore, it's waiting for ignition. So stay focused, stay patient, and remember, in every revolution, the early believers are always the ones who change their lives forever. This is your journey to XRP, and history is about to repeat itself.